The hero's unintentional choice. John's boots crunched against the rough, red sand as he moved through the strange alien landscape. Tall, twisted trees with glowing blue leaves towered above him, their branches swaying without any wind. He tightened his grip on his blaster, his senses sharp. This planet was unlike any he had visited before. He was an Earth explorer, a wanderer searching for new worlds and resources. But this place felt different. It was quiet, too quiet. Suddenly, a faint cry echoed through the air. John froze, his heart pounding. The sound was soft, but filled with pain. It was coming from behind a cluster of jagged rocks. His instincts screamed at him to turn back. He didn't know what kind of creature was on this planet, but curiosity and a sense of duty pulled him forward. Carefully, he climbed over the rocks and looked down into a small rocky pit. His eyes widened in shock. A woman lay there, tangled in thick, thorny vines that glowed with a faint purple light. Her skin was a soft shade of gold, shimmering under the alien sun. Long silver hair fell around her face, and her eyes were closed in pain. Her clothes were torn, and a strange green liquid oozed from cuts on her arms and legs. John hesitated. She was clearly not human. But her face looked gentle, peaceful even, despite the pain. She was beautiful, in a mysterious, otherworldly way. He shook his head, clearing his thoughts. Now wasn't the time to get distracted. The vines were tightening around her body, glowing brighter as they pulsed with energy. Whatever they were draining her life. John acted on instinct. He jumped down into the pit, landing hard on his feet. The woman's eyes snapped open, revealing bright silver irises that sparkled like stars. She looked at him, her expression a mix of fear and hope. "It's okay. I'm here to help," John said, keeping his voice calm. He pulled out his survival knife and began cutting through the vines. They hissed and tightened as he sliced through them, but he didn't stop. Each cut made the purple glow fade a little more. The woman gasped as the vines loosened. Her breathing grew steadier, her eyes never leaving John's face. Finally, the last vine snapped, turning to dust as it fell away. John reached out and caught her as she collapsed forward, her body weak and trembling. Her skin was warm, softer than anything he had ever touched. She looked up at him, her silver eyes shimmering with tears. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Then, her hand brushed against his wrist, and a sharp pain shot through his arm. John winced, almost dropping her. A burning sensation spread across his wrist, and he looked down to see a strange symbol glowing on his skin. It looked like two circles connected by a line, shining with the same purple light as the vines. "What the?" he muttered, his eyes wide with shock. But before he could say anything else, the symbol faded, leaving behind a faint mark, almost like a tattoo. The woman's body went limp in his arms, her eyes closing as she lost consciousness. Panic surged through him, but he felt her steady heartbeat. She was alive, just exhausted. He gently laid her on the ground, his mind racing. Who was she? Why was she trapped in those deadly vines? And what was that strange symbol on his wrist? He touched the mark, feeling the warm pulse beneath his skin. It was like the mark was alive, connected to his heartbeat. His mind spun with questions, but he had no answers. John looked down at the unconscious woman. Her breathing was soft, her face peaceful. She looked so fragile, so innocent, but he couldn't ignore the strange feeling in his chest, like an invisible string was tying him to her. A chill ran down his spine as he remembered the way her eyes had sparkled when she looked at him. They were filled with gratitude. And something more, something deeper, ancient, and powerful. His communicator beeped, breaking his thoughts. It was his ship's eye, alerting him that a storm was approaching. They needed to get out of there before it hit. With a sigh, John lifted the woman into his arms. She was light, her body warm against his chest. As he began the climb back to his ship, he felt the symbol on his wrist pulse again, like it was sensing with her heartbeat. Unseen by John, a shadowy figure watched from a distance, its eyes glowing with the same purple light. It vanished into the trees, whispering in a language older than time. Unbreakable bond. John's ship hummed softly as it cut through the thick atmosphere, heading towards his base camp on the far side of the planet. The alien woman lay motionless on the cot in the back, her silver hair shimmering under the dim cabin lights. Her golden skin glowed faintly, a soft warmth that made her look otherworldly, almost ethereal. He glanced at her, his eyes lingering on her peaceful face. She was beautiful, there was no denying that. But his mind kept returning to the symbol on his wrist. It was still there, faint but present, pulsing gently in rhythm with his heartbeat. Every time he looked at it, a strange warmth spread through his chest, a feeling of attachment he couldn't explain. The ship's AI broke his thoughts with a calm, mechanical voice. Approaching base camp. Landing sequence initiated. John pulled his eyes away from her and focused on the controls. His hands moved automatically, guiding the ship down smoothly. As the thrusters hummed and the landing gear touched the ground, he felt a wave of relief. It was good to be back at base, somewhere familiar. But the feeling of safety was short-lived. As he turned to check on the woman, her eyes fluttered open. Silver light filled the cabin as she stared at him, her gaze intense and focused. "Where am I?" Her voice was soft, melodic, but there was a trembling fear beneath the words. John hesitated. "You're safe. I found you trapped in some vines and I brought you to my base." She looked down at her arms, where faint scars remained from the thorns. Her fingers traced the marks, her expression shifting from confusion to understanding. "You saved me," she whispered, her eyes widening as they locked onto his wrist. "No, you bonded with me." John's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, bonded?" She sat up quickly, her movements sharp and panicked. Her silver hair flowed around her like liquid light as she reached out, grabbing his wrist. The symbol flared to life, glowing bright purple as warmth shot up his arm. John felt his heart race, his chest tightening. He couldn't move, couldn't pull away from her touch. It was like his body was frozen, his will no longer his own. She released him, her eyes filled with sorrow. You didn't know, did you?" "Know what?" John's voice was hoarse, fear creeping into his tone. "What did I do?" She looked away, her shoulders trembling. "You saved me. And by doing so, you accepted the bond of life. You are my chosen." The words hung heavy in the air. John's mind raced, trying to make sense of it. "Chosen? What are you talking about?" She looked back at him, tears shimmering in her silver eyes. "On my planet, when one saves another from death, they accept responsibility for that life. The bond is eternal. It cannot be broken, even by death." John took a step back, his heart pounding. That's crazy. I didn't agree to that." She lowered her gaze, her voice trembling. "It does not matter. The bond is sealed. Our fates are tied. Forever." He felt cold, his skin prickling with goosebumps. "No, I didn't sign up for this. I was just trying to help you." She stood up, her figure graceful even in her weakness. "I know, and I am grateful. But the bond has its rules. We cannot be apart. If we try, we will die." The symbol on his wrist pulsed, a sharp pain shooting up his arm. John gritted his teeth, clutching his wrist as the glow faded. He looked at her, his anger boiling over. "You're saying I have no choice?" She shook her head, her voice heavy with sorrow. "I am sorry, but the bond is sacred. It connects our souls. If one is harmed, the other feels the pain. If one dies, the other follows." John's knees buckled, and he sank onto the pilot's chair, his head spinning. He was trapped, tied to an alien woman he didn't even know. His life, his freedom, gone in an instant. He looked at her, his anger replaced by despair. "Who are you?" She hesitated before speaking. "My name is Soraya. Was a guardian of the sacred woods. Those vines, they were cursed, I was betrayed by my own people. John's eyes narrowed. Why would they do that? Soraya's hands clenched into fists, her body trembling with anger. Because I refused to marry the High Commander. He sought power, and my bond would have made him immortal. John's eyes widened. Immortal. Soraya nodded. Our bond is more than just life. It grants strength, longevity, and power. That is why it is so sacred and so dangerous. John stood up, his determination returning. Then we break it. Her face fell, her eyes filled with pain. It cannot be broken without destroying both our souls. He felt his hope crumble. So, I'm stuck with you, forever. She looked away, shame and sorrow written across her face. Yes, unless. John's eyes lit up. Unless what? She hesitated, her voice barely above a whisper. Unless you accept me as your life partner, only then will the bond be complete, and the pain will end. John's mouth went dry. Life partner. The words echoed in his head, making his stomach twist. You mean marriage? Soraya's cheeks flushed gold, her eyes refusing to meet his. Yes, that is the human word for it. John laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. This just keeps getting better. Soraya looked at him, her eyes pleading. I know this is not fair, but if we do not complete the bond, we will both suffer. The pain will only grow until it destroys us. John looked down at the symbol on his wrist. It was faint now, but he could feel its presence, a constant reminder of the invisible chain tying him to her. He was trapped, caught in an ancient tradition he didn't understand. He looked up at Soraya, his eyes hard. We'll find another way. I'm not giving up my life, or my freedom. Soraya's face softened, a flicker of hope in her eyes. Then, I will help you. But know this, the bond is growing stronger. If we do not find a way soon, it will consume us both. John's fists tightened. He wouldn't let this bond control him. He wouldn't let his fate be decided by an alien curse. He would fight it, no matter what it took. Unseen by them, shadows moved outside the base, eyes glowing with hunger. The bond had been sealed, and now the creatures that fed on it were coming. Running from fate. The air was tense inside the base. John paced back and forth, his mind racing. The symbol on his wrist felt warm, pulsing in time with his heartbeat. Every time his eyes fell on Soraya, he felt a strange pull, a magnetic force tying him to her. He hated it. Soraya sat quietly on the cot, her silver hair flowing over her shoulders like liquid moonlight. Her golden skin glowed softly, a reminder of how alien she truly was. Her silver eyes followed his every movement, filled with guilt and sorrow. Stop looking at me like that, John snapped, his voice harsher than he intended. I didn't ask for this. Soraya's shoulders trembled. I know. I am sorry. But the bond, it cannot be undone. John slammed his fist against the wall, pain shooting up his arm. There's always a way out. I just need to find it. Soraya looked down, her fingers nervously twisting her silver hair. If you leave me, the bond will cause you pain. The farther you go, the worse it will get. John's jaw tightened. I don't believe in curses. Without another word, he stormed out of the base, slamming the door behind him. The cold, alien wind hit his face as he stepped outside. The red sands stretched out before him, the twisted trees swaying under the pale violet sky. He kept walking, his steps heavy and determined. He would leave her behind. He would break this curse, no matter what it took. He was human, and humans didn't bow down to fate. The symbol on his wrist began to glow softly, a faint purple light that grew brighter with every step he took. John ignored it, forcing himself to keep moving. But then the pain began. It was a sharp, stabbing pain that shot up his arm, spreading through his chest like fire. He stumbled, clutching his wrist as the light grew brighter. His heart pounded wildly, his breath coming in ragged gasps. But he wouldn't give up. Gritting his teeth, he forced himself to keep walking, fighting against the pain. Every step felt like his body was being torn apart, his bones cracking under the pressure. But he didn't stop. The world blurred around him, his vision fading as the pain grew unbearable. His knees buckled, and he collapsed onto the red sand, his body trembling. The symbol on his wrist burned bright, like molten lava searing his skin. Then he heard it, a soft, anguished cry. Soraya's voice, echoing through his mind. "John, please, don't leave me." The pain exploded, tearing through him like a blade. He screamed, his body convulsing as his vision went black. When he opened his eyes, he was back at the base, lying on the cold floor. Soraya was kneeling beside him, her hands glowing as she held his wrist. Tears streamed down her golden cheeks, her body shaking with sobs. John tried to speak, but his voice was weak, his body drained of all strength. You brought me back." Soraya nodded, her silver eyes filled with pain. "I had no choice. The bond was killing you." He looked at his wrist, where the symbol still glowed softly, mocking him. "I was so close." Soraya's voice broke. "Why? Why do you hate me so much?" John's anger flared. "You ruined my life. I didn't ask for this. I don't want to be tied to you. Forever." Soraya flinched, her eyes dropping to the floor. "I never wanted this either, but we are bound. If you leave me, you will die, and so will I." John felt his heart twist. He hated this bond, but seeing her in pain was even worse. He didn't want her to die. Not like this. But he couldn't accept being chained to her either. I need some air," he muttered, pushing himself to his feet. His body was weak, his limbs trembling, but he needed to clear his head. Without looking back, he walked out of the base, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The twisted trees loomed around him, their branches swaying like dark shadows. But something was wrong. The air felt heavy, thick with a strange energy that made his skin crawl. A chill ran down his spine as he heard a low growl echo through the trees. John spun around, his eyes wide with fear. Shadows moved between the trees, glowing eyes watching him from the darkness. There were at least 6 of them, their bodies covered in scales that shimmered with dark energy. Their mouths dripped with black saliva, their teeth long and razor-sharp. His heart pounded as the creatures stepped into the light, their eyes locked on his wrist. The symbol glowed brightly, and they growled in hunger, their bodies vibrating with anticipation. What are those?" John whispered, his voice trembling. Soraya's voice came from behind him, her tone cold and fearful. "Shadow hunters, creatures that feed on the bond. They were drawn to us, because we are incomplete." John's blood ran cold. "Incomplete." Soraya nodded, her face pale. "The bond is unstable, because you refuse to accept it. Until you do, we are vulnerable." The creatures snarled, their bodies moving in perfect synchronization as they surrounded them. John felt his back press against Soraya's, her warmth spreading through him. The symbol on his wrist glowed brighter, reacting to her presence. Soraya's voice was steady, but he could hear the fear in it. "We must fight, or they will devour us." John's body moved on instinct, his hand gripping his blaster as he aimed at the nearest creature. It lunged at him, its mouth wide open, revealing rows of sharp teeth, dripping with black venom. He fired, the laser blast hitting it square in the chest. But the creature didn't even flinch. It absorbed the energy, its body glowing brighter as it grew larger, more powerful. "They feed on energy," Soraya shouted, her hands glowing with silver light. "Use the bond's power." John's heart raced. He didn't understand how the bond worked, but there was no time to hesitate. He closed his eyes, focusing on the warmth spreading from his wrist. It grew stronger, pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. He felt Soraya's presence, her energy flowing into him. Their heartbeats synced, their minds connecting as the bond strengthened. Power surged through his body, filling him with strength and speed. He opened his eyes, the world glowing with bright, vibrant light. The creatures hesitated, their bodies flickering as they sensed his power. John grinned, his fear replaced by confidence. Together, they moved as one, their bodies in perfect harmony. Soraya's silver light danced around him, forming a shield that blocked the creature's attacks. John's blaster glowed with bond energy, each shot tearing through the creatures like lightning. They fought fiercely, their powers growing stronger as the bond solidified. The shadow hunters howled in agony, their bodies disintegrating into shadows as they were defeated. As the last creature vanished, the symbol on John's wrist glowed bright, then faded. He collapsed to his knees, his body exhausted but victorious. Soraya knelt beside him, her face pale but relieved. The bond, it's getting stronger. John looked at his wrist, the faint mark still present. He couldn't deny it anymore. He was connected to her, and there was no running from it. Acceptance and protection. John leaned against the cold metal wall of the base, his body trembling with exhaustion. The battle with the shadow hunters had drained him. His muscles burned, his mind felt heavy, and his wrist still pulsed with the faint glow of the symbol. It was a constant reminder of his bond with Soraya, of his fate now tied to hers. Soraya stood a few feet away, her silver hair falling over her golden shoulders like a cascade of moonlight. Her face was pale, her eyes filled with worry. She watched him closely, her fingers nervously twisting the edge of her dress. "Are you all right?" she asked softly, her voice hesitant. John looked up, his eyes meeting hers. For a moment, he saw the fear and vulnerability in her gaze, and his anger softened. She didn't ask for this bond any more than he did. She was just as trapped as he was. "I'll survive," he muttered, rubbing his wrist. The symbol was warm, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. I don't understand any of this." Soraya moved closer, her steps light and graceful. "I will explain. Everything. You deserve to know." She sat down on the floor, her legs tucked beneath her. John hesitated but joined her, his back against the wall, his body still tense. He didn't trust her, not completely. But he needed answers. Soraya took a deep breath, her silver eyes glowing softly. "On my planet, the bond of life is sacred. It is the strongest connection two souls can share. It is created when one life is saved by another, sealing their fates together." John's jaw tightened. "So, because I saved you, I'm stuck with you. Forever." Her face fell, her eyes dropping to her lap. "Yes, our souls are linked. If one of us is harmed, the other feels the pain. If one of us dies, the other will follow." John felt his chest tighten. He thought back to when he tried to leave, the pain that almost killed him. He was truly trapped. There was no escape. Soraya continued, her voice heavy with sorrow. "But the bond is not just a curse. It grants power, strength beyond imagination. Together, we are stronger than any creature on this planet. But that strength comes at a cost, the cost of our freedom." John looked down at his wrist. The symbol glowed faintly, almost like it was breathing. This is how we defeated those creatures." Soraya nodded. "The shadow hunters feed on incomplete bonds. They are drawn to the instability, to the pain. If we do not complete the bond, they will keep coming. They will hunt us until we are destroyed." John's fists tightened. He hated this, hated being tied to someone he didn't know, hated losing his freedom. But he hated feeling powerless even more. He wasn't going to let these creatures kill him, or her. He looked at Soraya, his eyes hard. "How do we fight them?" She blinked in surprise, her silver eyes widening. You want to fight." John pushed himself to his feet, his legs still weak, but his determination burning strong. "I don't have a choice, do I? If these things are going to keep coming, then I need to be ready. We need to be ready." Soraya stood up, her face softening. "The bond grants us power, but only if we are united. We must learn to fight together, to synchronize our energy. John felt his heart race. How do we do that? She moved closer, her eyes locked on his. We must connect. Our minds must become one. Our heartbeats must sync. John's face flushed. Sync. Our heartbeats. She nodded, her face serious. If we do not trust each other, the bond will weaken. But if we are in harmony, our power will grow. John swallowed, his throat suddenly dry. This was more than just fighting. He would have to open his mind to her, let her in. It was terrifying, but there was no other way. He looked at her, his eyes filled with determination. All right, let's do this. Soraya's face brightened, a faint smile forming on her lips. Very well. Close your eyes and focus on my heartbeat. John hesitated but did as she asked. He closed his eyes, his senses tuning into her presence. He could feel her energy, warm and bright, like sunlight washing over him. Her voice was soft, echoing in his mind. Feel the bond. Feel our connection. He focused on the symbol on his wrist. It glowed brighter, its warmth spreading through his body. He could feel her heartbeat, steady and strong, matching his own. Their heartbeats sensed, their minds connecting. He could feel her emotions, her fear, her sorrow, her hope. He felt her pain, the loneliness she carried in her heart. His chest tightened. She was just as scared as he was. She was lost, alone, trapped in a fate she never asked for. His anger melted away, replaced by understanding. She wasn't his enemy. She was his ally, his partner. Their minds fused, their energies blending together. He felt her power flowing into him, merging with his own. It was incredible, like lightning coursing through his veins. His eyes snapped open, glowing with silver light. Soraya's eyes mirrored his, their bodies surrounded by a bright, shimmering aura. Their powers had combined, forming a shield of light around them. Soraya's voice was stronger now, filled with confidence. We are one, and together, we are unstoppable. A roar echoed outside the base, shaking the walls. The shadow hunters were back, their hunger stronger than before. They could feel the bond growing, and they were desperate to consume it. John's heart raced, but he didn't feel fear. Not anymore. He looked at Soraya, his eyes blazing with determination. Let's finish this. They stepped outside, their glowing aura illuminating the dark landscape. The shadow hunters circled them, their eyes gleaming with hunger. But John and Soraya stood firm, their powers united. The creatures lunged, their bodies twisting through the air. John moved instinctively, his body flowing in perfect harmony with Soraya's. Their movements were synchronized, their energies blending as they fought as one. Blasts of silver light shot from their hands, tearing through the creatures. The shadow hunters howled, their bodies disintegrating under the power of the bond. One by one, they were destroyed, their darkness fading into nothingness. As the last creature vanished, the light around them faded. John fell to his knees, his body exhausted but victorious. Soraya knelt beside him, her face flushed but smiling. You did it, she whispered, her voice filled with pride. We did it. John looked at her, his heart pounding. For the first time, he felt hope. Maybe, just maybe, this bond wasn't a curse after all. But before he could speak, a shadow moved in the distance, watching them with glowing red eyes. It disappeared into the darkness, whispering words of vengeance. The battle was far from over, and their journey had just begun. The test of loyalty. The night was cold and still, the twin moons casting an eerie silver glow over the alien landscape. John sat by the fire outside the base, his eyes fixed on the flames as they danced in the wind. His body was exhausted, his mind a tangled mess of confusion and fear. He looked down at his wrist, at the faint symbol that continued to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. Even now, he could feel Soraya's presence through the bond, a constant warmth that refused to leave him. She was inside the base, resting after the battle with the shadow hunters. They had won, but the victory felt hollow. The bond was growing stronger, pulling him deeper into a destiny he never asked for. John's fists tightened, his jaw clenching with frustration. He had saved her out of compassion, out of duty. But that single act had cost him his freedom, his future. How was that fair? His thoughts were interrupted by a soft whisper. It floated through the air, carried by the wind. John's eyes snapped up, his heart skipping a beat. The shadows danced around him, twisting and shifting, forming a shape. A figure stepped out of the darkness, its body covered in flowing black robes. Its face was hidden beneath a hood, but its eyes glowed a deep crimson red. John's body tensed, his hand moving to his blaster. "Who are you?" The figure's voice was low, echoing through the night. "I am a messenger, a servant of the Ancient Ones. I have come to offer you freedom." John's heart raced. Freedom from the bond. The figure's eyes narrowed, its voice dripping with temptation. "Yes, the bond is a curse, tying you to that woman, to her fate. But there is a way to break it." John's mind spun. How? The figure took a step closer, its presence cold and heavy. "The bond is tied to her life. End it, and you will be free." John felt the blood drain from his face. You want me to kill her?" The figure's eyes gleamed. "She is the source of your pain, your imprisonment. End her life, and the bond will shatter." John's stomach twisted. He looked back at the base, at the faint light glowing inside. He could feel Soraya's presence, her heartbeat syncing with his own. Could he really do it? Could he really end her life? His hands trembled as he turned back to the figure. I can't. I won't." The figure's voice grew colder. "You saved her, but she has cursed you. She has tied you to her fate, for eternity. Is that the life you want?" John's heart ached. He remembered Soraya's face, her silver eyes filled with sorrow and pain. She was just as trapped as he was. She didn't choose this any more than he did. The figure's eyes burned brighter. "She is manipulating you, using the bond to control you. She has stolen your freedom, your future. Will you let her get away with that?" John's fists tightened, his anger flaring. He had lost everything because of her. His freedom, his dreams, his future. It was her fault. If he had never saved her, he wouldn't be in this mess. The figure's voice softened, becoming almost gentle. "There is no other way, no other escape. End her life, and reclaim your destiny." John's mind raced, his emotions in turmoil. Could he do it? Could he kill her to save himself? He looked down at his wrist, at the symbol that bound them together. It was faint, but he could feel its warmth, its connection to her. He closed his eyes, his chest tightening. He could feel her presence, her heartbeat syncing with his. Her emotions flowed through him. Fear, sorrow, hope. She was scared, scared of losing him, scared of being alone. His heart twisted in pain. She wasn't his enemy. She was his partner, his friend. She trusted him, depended on him. Could he really betray her? The figure's voice grew impatient. "Choose her life or your freedom. Make your choice." John's eyes snapped open, his resolve hardening. He looked at the figure, his voice cold and steady. "I choose to protect her." The figure's body stiffened, its red eyes burning with anger. "You would sacrifice your freedom for her?" John stood up, his shoulders squared, his eyes blazing with determination. "I won't betray her. I won't become the monster you want me to be." The figure's voice grew cold, filled with hatred. "Foolish human, you have sealed your fate." The shadows swirled around the figure, its body shifting and twisting. Its form grew larger, its robes turning into dark, leathery wings, its face elongated, its mouth filled with razor-sharp teeth. The creature let out a roar, its red eyes blazing with fury. "Then you shall die. With her." John's body tensed, his hand moving to his blaster. But before he could fire, the creature lunged at him, its wings spreading wide, blocking out the moonlight. He rolled to the side, the creature's claws slashing through the ground where he had just stood. It moved with unnatural speed, its body twisting and contorting as it attacked. John fired, his blaster shots hitting the creature's body, but they did nothing. The energy was absorbed, feeding its power. It laughed, its voice echoing through the night. "You cannot harm me, not while you are incomplete." John's eyes widened. Incomplete, the bond was still unstable. Without Soraya, he was powerless. The creature lunged again, its claws slicing through the air. John barely dodged, his body moving on instinct. He was fast, but the creature was faster. He fired again, but the shots were useless. The creature's body absorbed the energy, growing larger, more powerful. It roared, its eyes locked on his wrist. It was drawn to the bond, to his connection with Soraya. John's heart pounded as the truth hit him. The creature wasn't just feeding on energy, it was feeding on the bond. It wanted to consume their connection, to devour their souls. He looked back at the base, at the light glowing inside. He needed Soraya. They needed to fight together, or they would both die. He turned and ran, his body moving faster than he ever thought possible. The creature roared behind him, its wings flapping as it gave chase. Its claws tore through the ground, its body twisting and shifting as it hunted him. John burst through the base door, his eyes locking on Soraya. She looked up, her face pale with fear. "John, what's happening?" He grabbed her hand, his voice firm. "We're under attack. We need to fight, together." She nodded, her silver eyes glowing with determination. "Then let us end this, once and for all." Their hands intertwined, the symbol on John's wrist glowing bright. Energy flowed through them, their heartbeats sensing as one. Their minds connected, their powers blending together. A creature burst through the door, its red eyes burning with fury. But John and Soraya stood firm, their auras blazing with silver light. Together, they faced the darkness, their souls united. The bond was no longer a curse. It was their strength. The final battle. The air crackled with energy as John and Soraya stood side by side, their hands clasped together, their heartbeats sensed as one. Their bodies glowed with a silver aura, the symbol on John's wrist blazing with light. Power surged through them, filling them with strength and courage. The creature stood before them, its massive wings blocking out the moonlight. Its body was covered in dark, leathery scales that shimmered with shadows. Its eyes burned red, filled with hatred and hunger. Its mouth was lined with razor-sharp teeth, dripping with black venom. It let out a roar, the sound shaking the ground, its body vibrating with dark energy. The shadows around it twisted and writhed, feeding off its power, growing stronger. John's heart raced, his grip tightening on Soraya's hand. He could feel her fear through the bond, but he could also feel her determination. She wasn't running away. She was standing by his side, ready to fight. Soraya's voice was firm, echoing in his mind. "The creature is a shadow wraith, born from the darkness of broken bonds. It feeds on pain, on despair." John's jaw tightened. "Then we give it something it can't consume. Hope." Soraya's silver eyes glowed brighter, her aura pulsing with light. "Yes, together, we are stronger." The shadow wraith lunged at them, its wings spreading wide, its claws slashing through the air. John and Soraya moved in perfect harmony, their bodies flowing as one. They dodged the attack, their auras merging to form a shield of silver light. The creature's claws struck the shield, a shockwave of energy exploding around them. The ground cracked, the air vibrating with power. But the shield held, shimmering with strength. John's body moved on instinct, his mind connected to Soraya's. They fought as one, their powers synchronized, their souls in perfect harmony. He fired a blast of energy from his hand, the silver light shooting towards the creature like lightning. The creature howled as the energy struck its body, its shadows writhing in pain. But it didn't fall. It absorbed the energy, its body growing larger, more powerful. Soraya's voice was urgent, echoing in his mind. It feeds on our fear, on our doubts. We must focus. We must be one. John closed his eyes, his heart sensing with hers. He let go of his fear, his anger, his resentment. He opened his mind, letting Soraya in. He felt her pain, her sorrow, her hope. He felt her trust, her belief in him. Their bond grew stronger, their energies merging. The symbol on his wrist blazed with light, their auras becoming one. They moved together, their bodies flowing in perfect unison. They attacked as one, their hands glowing with silver light. Beams of energy shot from their palms, twisting and weaving through the air. The beams merged, forming a spiral of light that slammed into the creature, tearing through its shadows. The creature screamed, its body writhing in agony. Its shadows twisted and broke apart, the darkness fading under the power of their light. But it wasn't over. The creature's eyes burned brighter, its body expanding, growing larger. Its wings spread wide, blocking out the sky. Its mouth opened, releasing a wave of darkness that surged towards them like a tidal wave. John and Soraya braced themselves, their auras flaring as they formed a barrier of light. The darkness crashed against the barrier, the impact shaking the ground. The air vibrated with power, the shadows pushing against the light, trying to consume it. John gritted his teeth, his body trembling under the pressure. The creature was too powerful, its darkness too strong. Their light was fading, their energy draining. Soraya's voice was calm, steady. We cannot defeat it with power alone. We must break its connection to the darkness. John's eyes widened. How? Soraya's silver eyes softened, her aura glowing with warmth. By healing the bond, by accepting our fate. John's heart skipped a beat. Accepting their fate, accepting her. It was the only way. He couldn't keep fighting it. He couldn't keep running from it. He looked at her, his eyes filled with resolve. I accept the bond. I accept you. Her eyes shimmered with tears, her face glowing with joy. And I accept you, my chosen. Their hearts sensed, their souls merging. The bond completed, its power flooding through them. Their auras exploded with light, the symbol on his wrist blazing like a star. The darkness shattered, the creature's body writhing as the light tore through its shadows. It screamed, its voice filled with agony, its body breaking apart under the power of their bond. John and Soraya moved as one, their hands glowing with pure light. They raised their arms, their energies combining into a sphere of silver fire. The sphere shot towards the creature, piercing its chest, tearing through its heart. The creature's eyes widened, its mouth opening in a silent scream. Its body disintegrated, the shadows burning away, leaving nothing but light. The darkness faded, the night becoming clear and bright. The moon shone overhead, their silver light reflecting off the sand. The air was calm, the danger gone. John and Soraya stood together, their hands still intertwined, their auras fading as the power settled within them. The bond was complete, their souls united. They were no longer two beings, but one. John looked at her, his eyes soft. We did it, together. Soraya smiled, her silver eyes glowing with love. Yes, together. They stood in silence, their hearts still sensed, their bond stronger than ever. But before they could speak, a shadow moved in the distance, its eyes glowing red. John's body tensed, his senses sharp. More of them. Soraya shook her head, her face pale with fear. No, something worse. The ground shook, the air vibrating with power. A dark portal opened in the sky, shadows swirling around it. From the portal, a figure emerged, its body massive and terrifying. It was the true master of the shadow wraiths, the Ancient One. Its eyes burned with hatred, its presence overwhelming. It looked down at them, its voice echoing through the world. You have defied destiny, broken the cycle, but you cannot escape fate, or me. John's heart raced, his body trembling. The battle wasn't over. It was just beginning. He looked at Soraya, his eyes filled with determination. Then we fight, together. Soraya's eyes blazed with courage. Yes, together. Their auras flared, their hands still intertwined. The symbol on John's wrist glowed brighter, their powers merging once more. They stood against the darkness, ready to face the Ancient One. Their bond was no longer a curse. It was their destiny, and their greatest strength. Destiny sealed. The air grew heavy, vibrating with an ancient power that sent chills down John's spine. The sky twisted above, swirling with dark clouds that crackled with crimson lightning. The ground trembled, cracks forming under his feet as the shadowy figure descended from the portal, its presence suffocating, its power overwhelming. The Ancient One stood before them, towering like a living mountain of darkness. Its body was shrouded in swirling shadows, shifting and twisting, never revealing its true form. Its eyes burned with crimson light, piercing through the darkness, locking onto John and Soraya with a gaze that felt like fire. Its voice was deep, echoing through the world, shaking the very air around them. You dare defy fate. You dare break the cycle. John's heart pounded, his knees weak under the weight of the Ancient One's power, but he stood his ground, his hand tightly gripping Soraya's. The symbol on his wrist blazed with light, their bond flowing through him, giving him strength. He looked at Soraya, her silver eyes glowing with determination. She was scared. He could feel it through the bond. But she wasn't backing down. She stood by his side, her body trembling but her spirit unbroken. John squeezed her hand, his voice steady. We're in this together. Soraya's face softened, her aura glowing brighter. Yes, together. The Ancient One's eyes narrowed, its shadows twisting with anger. The bond is forbidden. It defies the balance. You must be destroyed to restore order. It raised its hand, the shadows swirling around it, forming a massive spear of darkness. The spear crackled with red lightning, vibrating with power as it aimed at them. John's heart raced, his instincts screaming at him to run. But he stood his ground, his eyes locked on the Ancient One. He couldn't run. Not anymore. Not when everything was at stake. He felt Soraya's energy flowing into him, their heartbeats sensing. The bond grew stronger, their souls merging, their powers blending together. They were no longer two beings, but one. The Ancient One hurled the spear, the air shattering as it tore through the sky, a streak of darkness racing towards them. John and Soraya moved in perfect harmony, their bodies flowing as one. They raised their hands, their auras flaring as a shield of silver light formed around them. The spear struck the shield, a shockwave of energy exploding around them. The ground shattered, the air vibrating with power. But the shield held, glowing brighter as it absorbed the darkness, reflecting it back. The Ancient One roared, its shadows writhing with fury. It raised its arms, the clouds above swirling faster, red lightning crackling through the sky. The ground split open, rivers of darkness surging towards them, twisting and writhing like serpents. John's body moved on instinct, his mind connected to Soraya's. They fought as one, their movements synchronized, their energies flowing in perfect harmony. Blasts of silver light shot from their hands, spiraling through the air, weaving through the darkness. The light clashed with the shadows, explosions of energy shaking the world. The ground trembled, the sky crackled, the air buzzed with power. But the darkness kept coming, growing stronger, feeding off the Ancient One's rage. John gritted his teeth, his body trembling under the pressure. The Ancient One was too powerful, its shadows too strong. Their light was fading, their energy draining. Soraya's voice echoed in his mind, calm and steady. We must weaken it, break its connection to the darkness. John's eyes widened. How? Soraya's silver eyes softened, her aura glowing with warmth. The Ancient One was born from broken bonds, from despair and hatred. It feeds on pain, on loss. We must counter it, with hope, with love. John's heart raced. Love. The word echoed in his mind, his chest tightening. He looked at Soraya, his eyes locking onto hers. He could feel her emotions through the bond, her pain, her fear, her sorrow. But beneath it all, he felt her love, her hope, her belief in him. His heart skipped a beat. She loved him, truly, deeply. And despite everything, despite his anger, his resentment, he loved her too. He squeezed her hand, his voice firm. I won't let you go. I won't lose you. Soraya's eyes shimmered with tears, her face glowing with joy. And I won't let you fall, my chosen. Their hearts sensed, their souls merging. The bond completed, its power flooding through them. The symbol on John's wrist blazed with light, their auras becoming one. The Ancient One howled, its shadows twisting with fury. No, it cannot be. The bond is forbidden. John's body moved on instinct, his mind connected to Soraya's. They raised their hands, their energies merging into a sphere of pure light. The sphere glowed with silver fire, vibrating with power. The Ancient One roared, its body expanding, growing larger, more terrifying. Its wings spread wide, blocking out the sky, its mouth opening to release a wave of darkness that surged towards them. John and Soraya didn't move. They stood their ground, their auras blazing with light. The darkness crashed against their shield, the impact shaking the world. But the light held, growing brighter, stronger. They moved as one, their voices echoing through the air. Together, we are stronger. The sphere of light shot towards the Ancient One, piercing through its chest, tearing through its heart. The shadows writhed, twisting and breaking apart as the light consumed them. The Ancient One screamed, its voice filled with agony, its body shattering under the power of their bond. Its form disintegrated, the shadows burning away, leaving nothing but light. The darkness faded, the clouds breaking apart, the sky becoming clear and bright. The moon shone overhead, their silver light reflecting off the sand. The air was calm, the danger gone. John and Soraya stood together, their hands still intertwined, their auras fading as the power settled within them. The bond was complete, their souls united. They were no longer two beings, but one. John looked at Soraya, his eyes soft. We did it, together. Soraya smiled, her silver eyes glowing with love. Yes, together. Their bond was no longer a curse. It was their strength, their destiny. They stood in silence, their hearts still sensed, their souls in perfect harmony. But before they could speak, the ground trembled, a voice echoing through the air. The cycle is broken. The balance must be restored. John's eyes widened, his body tensing. What was that? Soraya's face grew pale, her eyes wide with fear. The Ancient One was only the beginning. A portal opened in the sky, shadows swirling around it. From the portal, a figure emerged, its presence more powerful, more terrifying than anything they had faced before. It was the creator of bonds, the weaver of fates. Its body glowed with golden light, its eyes burning with ancient power. It looked down at them, its voice echoing through the world. You have defied destiny, broken the cycle. But fate cannot be changed. You will face judgment. John's heart raced, his body trembling. The final battle was yet to come, and this time, they were facing destiny itself. He looked at Soraya, his eyes blazing with determination. Then we fight, together. Soraya's eyes glowed with courage. Yes, together. Their auras flared, their hands still intertwined. The symbol on John's wrist glowed brighter, their powers merging once more. They stood against destiny, ready to face the ultimate challenge. Their bond was no longer just their strength, it was their hope, their love, their future.